Olivia Bennett had always believed that the small bakery I built with my own hands was the one place in the world where people looked at me and saw more than what was on the surface. Every morning before sunrise, I unlocked the doors, prepared fresh bread, decorated cakes, and created something that could bring comfort to strangers who walked through my shop. My father taught me that food was never only about ingredients. It was about patience, honesty, and respect. He used to tell me that people might forget the exact words you say, but they would always remember the way you made them feel. Those lessons became the foundation of everything I built, and I carried them with me every day. Outside my bakery, however, the world did not always see me the same way. People often noticed my size before they noticed my kindness, my determination, or the years I spent proving myself through hard work. I became familiar with the quiet judgments, the quick assumptions, and the way some people believe they already understood my entire story before I ever had the chance to tell it. I learned not to let those opinions define me because I knew my worth, and I knew the value of the life I was creating. For a long time, I believed that if I continued doing the right thing, eventually people would see the truth about who I really was. Then one evening, everything I had built was suddenly questioned. The event was supposed to be the biggest opportunity my bakery had ever received. The Moretti Foundation, one of New York's most influential organizations, had chosen my small business to provide desserts for their annual charity celebration. For a bakery like mine, surrounded by large companies with endless resources and famous names, it was the kind of opportunity people dreamed about for years. I still remember walking into that elegant building carrying carefully prepared pastries while guests in expensive suits and designer clothing moved around me as if they belonged there naturally. For a moment, I reminded myself that my work belonged in that room too. Talent did not require a certain appearance. Dedication did not depend on social status. Everything was going perfectly until a valuable family document disappeared from a private office near the event area. Within minutes, the atmosphere changed. Conversations became quieter. Guests who had been smiling moments earlier began looking around the room with suspicion. People wanted answers, but they were not searching everywhere equally. They were searching for the person who seemed easiest to blame. Then someone mentioned my name. Olivia was near the office earlier. That single sentence changed the way people looked at me. I watched the room transform around me. People who had complimented my desserts and thanked me for my work suddenly seemed uncertain. The hardest part was not the accusation itself. The hardest part was seeing how quickly people accepted it without knowing anything about me. Nobody asked about the years I spent building my bakery. Nobody asked about the trust one had earned from my customers. They only saw the person they expected me to be. I did not take anything, I said calmly. I was only there to deliver the desserts. But my explanation felt small compared to the power of their assumptions. A man standing nearby looked at me and said they were simply trying to understand what happened, but I recognized that feeling immediately. It was the feeling of being judged before anyone had truly listened. It was the feeling of knowing that your truth was competing against a story other people had already decided to believe. I wanted to explain every detail. I wanted to prove that they were wrong about me. I wanted to remind them that the quiet baker they underestimated had spent years building something through honesty and dedication. But I also knew that defending myself against every unfair assumption would not automatically make people see the truth. Sometimes the only thing you can do is remain calm and wait for someone to notice what everyone else ignored. Then the doors opened, and Adrian Moretti entered the room. Everyone knew his name. He was the man behind one of the most powerful business empires in New York, a figure people described with careful words because his reputation carried both respect and influence. Adrian Moretti was known as someone intelligent, disciplined, and almost impossible to deceive. I expected him to look at me the same way everyone else had. I expected him to see an accusation, a stranger, and the easiest explanation available. Instead, he looked at the documents on the table. Then he looked at the timeline of events. He did not speak immediately. He studied everything around him, as if he was searching for the detail that did not fit. When he finally looked toward the people waiting for his judgment, his expression remained calm. Something about this does not make sense. The room became uncertain. One of the executives quickly responded that the evidence clearly pointed toward me, but Sebastian did not accept the conclusion simply because everyone else had already accepted it. He looked again at the information in front of him and quietly said that the situation did not point towards someone making a mistake. It pointed towards someone wanting people to believe it did. For the first time that night, someone was not looking at me as the easiest person to blame. Adrian Moretti was looking at the question hidden beneath the accusation, and I had no idea that the secret buried inside my family's past was connected to his empire in a way that would change both of our lives forever. I thought one person believing me would make everything easier. I was wrong. Sometimes the hardest part is not proving your innocence. It is understanding why someone wanted you to be blamed in the first place. After Adrian Moretti questioned the accusations against me, the entire room changed. The people who were certain I was responsible suddenly became quiet. But I knew one thing. A powerful man asking questions did not erase the way they had looked at me. They still saw me as someone who did not belong there. Someone they could easily doubt. I returned to my bakery the next morning because I refused to let one terrible night define my entire life. The familiar smell of fresh bread and coffee reminded me of who I was before everything changed. My bakery had always been my safe place. Every recipe had a memory. Every customer had a story. It was not just a business. It was a piece of my family. That morning, I found Adrian waiting outside. I was surprised. A man like him did not usually stand outside a small neighborhood bakery. "You have questions," he said. I looked at him carefully. "I have many." He nodded. "Good. Questions are usually where the truth begins." I invited him inside, but I remained cautious. Adrian Moretti was not an ordinary person. His name carried influence. His decisions affected many people. But I had learned something important that night. Power did not always mean someone was right. "Why are you investigating this?" I asked. He looked around my bakery before answering. "Because the situation does not feel honest." I waited for more. He continued. "The missing document was important, but the way people reacted was more interesting." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Everyone wanted an answer before anyone searched for the truth. His words stayed with me. Because that was exactly what happened. People wanted a simple explanation. They wanted someone to blame. And I was the easiest choice. Adrian placed a folder on the counter. Inside were copies of records from the event. "I noticed something unusual," he said. "The document disappeared at a very specific time. Someone knew exactly when attention would be away from the office." I looked through the papers. "So someone planned this." He nodded. "Possibly." I looked at him. "Why would they choose me?" Adrian studied my expression before answering. "Because people often ignore the person they underestimate." That sentence felt personal. I had heard similar words before, but from him, they sounded different. He was not saying I was weak. He was explaining someone else's mistake. "There is something else," he said. "Your name appears in old records connected to my family." I stopped. "My name?" He nodded. "Your father." My heart changed when I heard that. My father had been gone for years, but his memory was still a part of everything I did. "What does my father have to do with this?" I asked. Adrian opened another document. It showed an old business connection between my father's company and the Moretti organization. I stared at the page. I knew my father worked with important people, but he never explained how important those connections were. "He never told me about this," I said quietly. "Maybe he was protecting you," Adrian replied. I looked at him. "Protecting me from what?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the documents again. "That is what I am trying to find out." For the first time, I saw something behind his controlled expression. Curiosity, but also uncertainty. Everyone believed Adrian Moretti had every answer. Yet standing there in my small bakery, he was searching too. Later that day, we reviewed more information together. We discovered my father's name appeared beside a company record that had been sealed for years. The details were incomplete, but one thing was clear. Someone had intentionally hidden parts of the past. "Your father was involved in something important," Adrian said. I looked at the documents. "And someone does not want people finding out." He nodded. Before leaving, Adrian stopped near the door. "Olivia." I looked back. "Yes. Do not let what happened at that event change how you see yourself." I was surprised by his words. A man known for controlling an empire was telling me not to let other people's opinions define me. After he left, I stood alone in my bakery, looking at the old family photograph beside the register. I realized the accusation against me was never the beginning of the story. It was only the moment when a hidden story finally started coming back to life. And somewhere in the past was a secret my father left behind, a secret connected to the man who had just walked into my world. I thought my father had left me only memories. I was wrong. He had left me a truth that someone had spent years trying to hide. The days after Adrian Moretti showed me the old records felt different. My bakery looked the same. The same wooden tables stood near the window. The same smell of cinnamon and fresh bread filled the air every morning. But something inside me had changed. For the first time in years, I started looking at my own family history with questions instead of memories. My father had always been a quiet man. He believed actions mattered more than words. When I was younger, I thought he simply avoided difficult conversations. Now I wondered if he had been carrying a burden he never wanted me to inherit. Sebastian continued his investigation, but this time he included me in every step. I noticed something unexpected about him. The man everyone described as cold and impossible to reach was actually someone who listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not assume. He waited until he understood the entire picture. That was different from the people who judged me in one evening. One afternoon, Sebastian came to my bakery carrying a small box. "Where did you get that?" I asked. He placed it gently on the counter. "From an old storage room connected to my family's records." My heart started beating faster. I already knew something inside belonged to my past. The box was simple. No special markings. No obvious sign that it carried something important. But sometimes the smallest things hold the biggest secrets. Inside were several old letters, a photograph, and a handwritten note with my father's name. I touched the paper carefully. It felt strange seeing his handwriting after so many years. "He wrote this before he passed away," I whispered. Sebastian stood quietly beside me. For once, he did not seem like a powerful businessman searching for answers. He looked like someone who understood what it meant to miss a person. I opened the first letter. My father's words were not about money or business. They were about trust. He wrote about people who had forgotten their promises. He wrote about a decision that could affect many lives. But most importantly, he wrote about a person he believed he could no longer trust. He knew something was wrong, I said. Sebastian looked at the letter. Yes, but he never revealed everything. I continued reading. The letter mentioned a hidden agreement created years earlier between two families. One side wanted to protect the truth. The other wanted to control it. My hands became still. Why would my father keep this from me? I asked. Sebastian answered carefully. Maybe because he believed keeping you away from this world was the only way to protect you. I looked at him. But someone still found a way to bring me into it. He did not deny it. The accusation at the event was not random. Someone knew my connection to the past. Someone knew I had information they wanted. Later that evening, Sebastian and I reviewed the old documents together inside his office. The city lights reflected across the windows as we searched through years of hidden information. I expected to feel uncomfortable surrounded by so much power. Instead, I felt something different. I felt like I was finally understanding a part of my own story. There is a name missing from these records, Sebastian said. I looked closer. What name? He pointed to a blank space where a signature should have been. Someone removed it. That small detail changed everything. The person behind the betrayal was not only hiding the present. They had been changing the past. Before I left, Sebastian stopped me near the elevator. Olivia, there is something you need to understand. I turned around. What? His expression became serious. The people who created this situation did not choose you because you were weak. They chose you because they believed nobody would listen to you. His words stayed with me long after I returned home. Because maybe that was their biggest mistake. They thought being overlooked meant being powerless. They thought my quiet life meant I had nothing valuable to protect. But they were wrong. The next morning, I found one more letter hidden inside the box. It contained only one sentence from my father. When the truth returns, trust the person who chooses honesty over power. I read those words again and again. I did not know who my father meant. But deep inside, I already knew my journey was connected to Adrian Moretti in a way neither of us fully understood yet. I used to believe secrets disappeared when people stopped talking about them. I was wrong. Some secrets do not disappear. They wait patiently until the right person finds them. After discovering my father's hidden letter, I could not look at my bakery the same way. Every familiar corner suddenly felt connected to a story I had never known. The old wooden shelves, the recipes passed down through my family, and even the small notebook my father left behind all seemed to hold pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to understand. Sebastian Moretti continued searching through his family's records, but the deeper we looked, the more complicated everything became. The missing signature from the old agreement was not an accident. Someone had carefully removed it. Someone wanted the past to remain incomplete. "There is something else you should see," Sebastian said one afternoon when he arrived at my bakery. His expression told me this was different from everything before. He placed a folder on the counter and opened it slowly. Inside was an old photograph. I recognized my father immediately. He was standing beside several people I had never seen before. But one person caught my attention. A younger version of Sebastian's father stood beside him. I looked at Sebastian. Our families knew each other. He nodded. More than I realized. That moment changed the way I saw everything. This was not just about a missing document or someone trying to blame me. This was about two families connected by a history neither of us fully understood. Sebastian explained that his father had always spoken highly of certain people who helped build the foundation of their organization. My father was one of those people. But years later, his name disappeared from official records. Why would someone erase him? I asked. Sebastian looked away for a moment. Because sometimes removing a person from history is easier than admitting what they knew. His answer made me think about my entire life. My father had never wanted recognition. He never cared about being powerful. He only cared about doing what was right. Maybe that was exactly why someone saw him as a problem. Over the next few days, Sebastian and I worked together to understand the connection between our families. I noticed how different he was from the image people created around him. Everyone saw him as a man who controlled everything. But I saw someone who was trying to repair something broken before he even understood how it happened. One evening, while reviewing old records in his office, I found a handwritten note attached to a business document. The handwriting looked familiar. It was my father's. My hands became still as I read the message. The truth will hurt those who built their lives on a lie, but silence will hurt everyone who comes after. I looked at Sebastian. He knew this would happen someday. Sebastian was quiet. Then he said, "Your father understood something many powerful people forget. A secret does not protect an empire forever. Eventually, it becomes the reason that empire falls." His words stayed with me, because I realized the person who betrayed us was not simply hiding information. They were protecting a version of the past that benefited them. The next morning, Sebastian received a message from someone inside his organization. Another record had been discovered. But this time, it was not about my father. It was about someone who had been close to Sebastian for decades. Someone who had helped build his empire. Someone who knew exactly what had been hidden. Sebastian read the message twice before putting his phone down. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at me with a serious expression. The person who changed these records was never outside my world. I felt a cold realization settle in. The betrayal was not coming from a stranger. It was coming from someone trusted. And suddenly, the question was no longer only about who wanted to hurt me. It was about who had been standing beside Sebastian while hiding the truth for years. I thought betrayal was something that happened between enemies. I was wrong. The deepest betrayals often come from the people who know exactly where you place your trust. After Sebastian told me that the person responsible for changing the records had been inside his own organization, everything felt different. The investigation was no longer about a missing document or a forgotten agreement. It was about understanding how someone could spend years standing beside a family while secretly hiding the truth. Sebastian became quieter after that discovery. I noticed it immediately. Before, he always had a plan. Every decision seemed calculated. Every word seemed chosen carefully. But this time, there was something different in his expression. It was not fear. It was disappointment. "There are very few people who have been with my family this long," he said while looking through old records. "That makes this harder than I expected." I understood what he meant. When someone unknown hurts you, the pain feels simple. But when someone you trusted changes your story, the pain becomes something harder to explain. That evening, Sebastian invited me to review more documents at his office. I still remembered the first time I entered that building. I felt like I did not belong. Everyone around me looked like they came from a world I had only seen from a distance. But now I walked through those doors differently. I was no longer the baker everyone overlooked. I was someone searching for answers. Inside the office, Sebastian showed me financial records from years earlier. My father's name appeared several times beside important decisions that shaped the foundation of his empire. "Your father was not just an employee," Sebastian said. "He was someone my family respected. I looked at the documents carefully. Then why was his name removed? Sebastian did not answer right away. He continued searching until he found something hidden inside an old file. It was a letter written by one of Sebastian's closest advisors, a man named Richard Hayes. Richard had worked with the Moretti family for over 20 years. He was trusted by everyone. The letter revealed that Richard had known about the original agreement between our families. He knew my father had discovered information that could change everything. But the letter was incomplete. The final pages were missing. He removed the ending, I said. Sebastian nodded. And that is where the most important information was probably written. I looked at him. Do you think he betrayed your family? Sebastian remained silent for a moment. I think he made choices he believed were necessary. That answer surprised me. I expected anger. I expected him to immediately see Richard as an enemy. Instead, Sebastian showed something I had not expected from him. Understanding. Maybe that was the difference between him and the people who judged me. He did not rush to create a simple answer. He searched for the entire truth. The next day, I returned to my bakery, but my thoughts stayed with everything we discovered. A customer asked me if I was doing okay. I smiled and said yes. But the truth was more complicated. I was learning things about my father that changed the way I remembered him. He was not just the kind man who taught me recipes. He was someone who carried responsibility, someone who stood between honesty and a powerful secret. That evening, Sebastian called me. His voice sounded serious. Olivia, I found something. I waited. Richard was not the only person who knew about the agreement. My heart sank slightly. Who else knew? There was a pause before he answered. Someone from my own family. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation I had faced. Because now we understood the truth was bigger than one person. It was a history of decisions, hidden promises, and people who believed they could control the future by controlling the past. Before ending the call, Sebastian said something I did not expect. I need you to be careful. I almost smiled. You mean because of the secret? He answered softly, no. Because people who spend years hiding the truth are usually afraid of what happens when someone finally finds it. After that conversation, I stood inside my quiet bakery and looked at my father's old notebook. For years, I thought it was just a memory. Now I realized it was a message waiting for the right moment. And the more we uncovered, the clearer one thing became. The person who betrayed us had not just hidden a secret. They had built an entire future around keeping it hidden. I used to believe that trust was something people earned slowly over time. I was wrong. Sometimes trust is built for years, and then one hidden truth can make you question everything you thought you knew. After discovering that someone from Sebastian Moretti's own family was connected to the secret, I realized this was no longer just about my father. It was about an entire legacy built on choices made long before I was born. The next morning, Sebastian came to my bakery earlier than usual. I could tell something had changed before he even spoke. He placed a folder on the counter and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. I found the connection, he said. I stopped what I was doing. Between my father and your family? He nodded. Inside the folder was a collection of old documents that had been hidden away for years. The pages showed that my father and Sebastian's father had once worked together to protect a business agreement that was meant to help both families. But someone changed the agreement after they trusted the wrong person. I read the details carefully. So my father was trying to protect this information? Sebastian looked at me. Yes, and he probably knew someone close to us was trying to erase it. I thought about all the years I spent believing my father was simply a quiet man who avoided complicated situations. Now I understood something different. He was not running away from problems. He was carrying them so I would not have to. That realization was painful, but it also gave me a strange sense of peace. My father had not left me with unanswered questions because he forgot about me. He had left clues because he believed one day I would be strong enough to understand them. Sebastian and I continued reviewing the documents. The more we discovered, the more obvious it became that someone had carefully controlled the information for years. But there was one thing that confused me. If this secret could damage your empire, why would my father trust you enough to leave these clues behind? I asked. Sebastian looked toward the window. The city stretched beneath us, full of people who had no idea how many hidden stories existed behind those buildings. Maybe because he knew I was not the person he needed to fear, Sebastian answered. I looked at him. That was the first time he admitted that someone inside his own world could be the real threat to everything he built. Later that afternoon, Sebastian introduced me to another side of his life. Not the powerful image people talked about. Not the reputation that made people cautious around him. He showed me the responsibilities behind it all. The employees who depended on his decisions. The families connected to his businesses. The people who would be affected if the truth was handled carelessly. I understood something important in that moment. Sebastian was not protecting his power because he wanted control. He was protecting people who trusted him. That did not make him perfect, but it made him human. You know, I said, I expected someone like you to ignore someone like me. He looked surprised. Someone like you? I smiled slightly. Someone people do not take seriously at first. Sebastian became quiet. Then he said, that was my mistake too. Those words stayed with me, because they meant more than an apology. They meant he finally understood what everyone else had failed to see. My value was never determined by my appearance, my job, or where I came from. That evening, we discovered another hidden message from my father. It was written on the back of an old document. Only a few words, but they changed everything. The person who finds this must choose truth over revenge. I read the sentence twice. Sebastian looked at me. Your father knew the difference between justice and anger. I nodded. He wanted the truth, not destruction. For the first time since this began, I felt like I understood why my father trusted me with this secret. He did not choose me because I had power. He chose me because he knew I would not use the truth to hurt others. Before I left, Sebastian said, Olivia, whoever did this underestimated you. I looked back at him. Why? He answered, because they saw a baker. They never saw the person holding the missing piece of the story. I walked home that night knowing something had changed. I was no longer searching for answers about my father's past. I was protecting the truth he believed was worth protecting. And somewhere inside Sebastian's empire, the person responsible was beginning to realize that the secret they buried for years was finally coming back into the light. I thought finding the truth would bring peace. I was wrong. Sometimes the truth does not close a chapter. Sometimes it opens the door to the questions everyone tried to avoid. After discovering my father's final message and understanding why he trusted me with the secret, I felt closer to the answer than ever before. But I also realized something else. The person who had hidden the truth for years was still watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to protect everything they had built. Sebastian and I continued reviewing the remaining documents from his family's archives. Every page revealed another piece of a story that had been carefully changed over time. The original agreement between our families was not about power or control. It was about responsibility. My father and Sebastian's father had created a plan to protect people who depended on them. But someone believed that keeping control was more important than keeping promises. There is one name that keeps appearing, Sebastian said while studying the records. I looked at the document. Richard Hayes. Sebastian nodded. Richard had been more than an advisor. He had been part of the family for decades. He knew every important decision. He knew every weakness. He knew where every secret was kept. Why would someone who was trusted for so long do this? I asked. Sebastian remained quiet for a moment. Because sometimes people convince themselves that protecting their own idea of the future is the same as doing the right thing. I understood what he meant. The most dangerous choices were not always made by people who believed they were wrong. Sometimes they were made by people who believed they were the only ones who knew better. Later that evening, Sebastian asked me to visit a private room where his family kept historical records. The room was filled with old photographs, handwritten notes, and documents from different generations. I looked around and realized I was standing inside a part of history that my father had once known. Sebastian handed me a photograph. It showed my father standing beside his father years ago. They were smiling. They looked like two people who believed they were building something meaningful together. I never knew this existed, I whispered. Sebastian looked at the picture. Neither did I. That was the moment I saw something change in him. For the first time, he was not searching only for answers about his empire. He was searching for answers about his own family. We continued looking through the records and discovered a hidden note attached to an old agreement. The handwriting belonged to my father. It said, "The truth will eventually find its way to someone who values people more than power." I read the sentence carefully. Sebastian looked at me. "Do you think he meant you?" I shook my head slightly. "I think he meant someone who would choose what is right, even when it is difficult." Sebastian smiled faintly. "That sounds like you." I looked away because I was not used to hearing words like that from someone like him. For most of my life, People noticed what I looked like before they noticed who I was. They saw a baker. They saw someone ordinary. They never saw someone capable of carrying a secret that powerful. The next morning, Sebastian received unexpected news. A company record had been altered again. Someone was trying to remove another piece of evidence before we could understand the full picture. "They know we are close," he said. I looked at him. "Are you worried?" He thought for a moment before answering. "I am concerned about what they are willing to hide. But I am not worried about the truth." His confidence was different from the way people described him. It was not arrogance. It was trust. Trust in facts. Trust in people. Trust in doing what was right. Before leaving his office, I asked him one question. "Why do you believe me?" Sebastian looked at me for a long moment. Because when everyone else saw a person they could blame, I saw someone who was trying to protect the truth. Those words stayed with me. But I knew the hardest part was still ahead. We had discovered the secret. We had found the person connected to the betrayal. But we had not yet uncovered the final reason behind it. And when that reason finally came to light, it would force Sebastian to decide what mattered more. The empire he inherited, or the truth that built it. I thought the hardest part was finding the secret. I was wrong. The hardest part was accepting what the secret meant. After years of believing power was built on control, Sebastian Moretti was finally facing a truth that could change everything he had inherited. The documents, the hidden messages, and my father's warnings all pointed to the same conclusion. Someone had protected a lie for years, not because they hated Sebastian's family, but because they believed the truth would destroy everything they had built. But they never understood that hiding the truth was already destroying it. The morning after we discovered the altered records, Sebastian asked me to meet him at his office. The city outside the windows looked peaceful, but inside that room, everything felt different. The folders on his desk represented decades of decisions, promises, and secrets. "I found the missing connection," he said. I looked at him carefully. "What did you find?" He placed an old document in front of me. It was the original agreement between our families. The final page that had been removed was finally recovered. My hands became still as I read the words. It explained that my father and Sebastian's father had created a plan to protect the people who depended on them. But it also revealed something unexpected. They had chosen a third person to oversee the agreement because they believed both families needed someone they could trust. That person was Richard Hayes. I looked at Sebastian. So he was supposed to protect this. Sebastian nodded slowly. Yes, but somewhere along the way, he decided he knew better than everyone else. I thought about Richard. He was not a stranger. He was someone who had spent years earning trust. That was what made the betrayal harder to understand. Maybe he thought he was saving your family, I said. Sebastian looked at the document. Maybe, but saving people without their choice is not protection. His words surprised me because they showed how much he had changed. The man I first met believed every problem could be solved through control. Now he understood that trust was something power could never replace. Later that day, we found Richard's private notes. They did not show someone who wanted to destroy the Moretti Empire. They showed someone who became afraid of losing it. He believed the truth would create uncertainty. He believed people needed him to make decisions for them. But every choice he made removed another piece of honesty from the foundation. He was not protecting the empire, Sebastian said quietly. He was protecting his own place inside it. I looked at him, and that is why he chose me. Sebastian nodded. He knew you were connected to the past. He thought blaming you would make the questions disappear. I remembered that night at the event. The way people looked at me. The way they decided who I was before knowing anything about me. For a long time, I thought that moment showed my weakness. Now I understood something different. It showed their mistake. They underestimated the person who had nothing to lose by telling the truth. That evening, Sebastian and I returned to my bakery. It was the first time he had been there since everything began. He looked around at the small space that meant so much to me. This place built you, he said. I smiled. Not exactly. It reminded me who I was. He looked at the shelves filled with recipes from my family. Your father would be proud. I felt the emotion in those words. Not because he mentioned my father, but because Sebastian finally understood why the truth mattered. It was never about destroying someone. It was about honoring the people who chose honesty when silence would have been easier. Before leaving, Sebastian received one final message. The last hidden record had been found. It contained the name of the person who originally helped Richard change the agreement. Sebastian read the message silently. His expression changed. Who is it? I asked. He looked at me and took a deep breath. Someone I never thought I would have to question. In that moment, I realized the truth was closer than we expected. The betrayal did not begin with Richard. He was only protecting a secret that belonged to someone else. And the final person behind it all was about to be revealed. I thought the truth would feel like an ending. I was wrong. The truth was not the end of the story. It was the moment when everyone finally had to face what they had avoided for years. After Sebastian discovered that Richard Hayes had not acted alone, we knew the final answer was hidden somewhere inside the history of the Moretti family. The last record contained a name that neither of us expected. It belonged to someone who had been there from the beginning. Someone who had guided decisions, protected secrets, and earned the trust of everyone around him. Sebastian looked at the document for a long time before speaking. My uncle, Vincent Moretti. I watched his expression change. Not anger, not disbelief. Something deeper. Disappointment. Vincent had been one of the people Sebastian admired most when he was younger. He was someone who helped shape the family business and taught Sebastian important lessons about responsibility. Finding out that he had been connected to the hidden agreement was not easy to accept. Are you sure? I asked quietly. Sebastian nodded. The records confirm it. We spent the next several hours reviewing everything connected to Vincent's decisions. The truth was complicated. Vincent had not created the original agreement to harm anyone. He had once believed in protecting the family. But over time, his priorities changed. He became convinced that preserving the Moretti name was more important than honoring the promises that created it. That was the moment I understood something important. Betrayal does not always begin with hatred. Sometimes it begins with fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of admitting mistakes. Fear of facing the consequences of choices made long ago. Sebastian eventually met with Vincent and asked him why he changed the records. I was not there for their entire conversation, but Sebastian later told me what happened. Vincent admitted the truth. He believed the empire would collapse if people discovered the past. He thought hiding the information was the only way to protect everyone. But Sebastian asked him one question that changed everything. If the foundation is built on trust, how can protecting a lie save it? Vincent had no answer. Because deep down, he knew Sebastian was right. The truth was never the enemy. The silence was. When everything was finally revealed, my name was cleared. The people who once questioned me understood what had really happened. But something surprised me. I did not feel satisfaction from proving them wrong. I felt relief. For years, I carried the feeling that I had to prove my worth to people who never truly saw me. I finally understood that my value was never something other people could give or take away. Sebastian changed too. The man who once believed power was the strongest protection learned that honesty was stronger. He started making decisions differently. He listened more. He trusted people instead of controlling every outcome. One evening, I stood outside my bakery watching the city lights appear across New York. Sebastian walked beside me. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then he smiled slightly. Do you remember the first night we met? I laughed softly. Unfortunately, yes. Everyone thought I was the problem. He looked at me. I did not. I smiled. No. You just thought there was a question nobody had answered yet. He nodded. And you were the answer. Those words stayed with me. Because when this journey began, I thought I was fighting to protect my reputation. I thought I was trying to prove I was not the person they believed me to be. But I learned something much more important. I did not need to become someone else to be respected. I only needed to remain true to who I was. Sebastian built an empire with influence and determination. But I learned that even the strongest people need someone who reminds them what truly matters. The secret my father left behind was never meant to destroy a family. It was meant to save them from forgetting what made them worthy of trust. And in the end, the person everyone overlooked became the person who revealed the truth, healed old wounds, and changed the future of an entire empire.